All right, why don't we'll start, and then hopefully people will start jumping in as we continue on. So hello everyone and welcome to Path Parent to Parent and Family Voices of Connecticut's webinar series called A Guide to Supporting Youth Through Transition. And this is the second series of 5. I'm Carmina Cerioli, and I'm the co-executive director for Path, Parent to Parent and Family Voices of Connecticut. And my colleague Nancy is also on, and she will be introducing Kathleen shortly. So as I said, we've had 5 sessions planned. We've already done the first. And so we have the next one after tonight will be July 29th, which is the financial independence, which will cover money management and ABLE accounts. And then on August 26th, employment will be self-directed employment, customized employment, and small businesses ownership. And then on the last one would be September 30th, post-secondary education. So for those of you that are not familiar with PATH, as you could see, I won't read the whole thing, but PATH is a free statewide grassroots parent organization, and we provide support to families of children with special healthcare needs. We have a few different programs. The listener program is our one-to-one matching service, which we provide support to families that have just been told of their child's diagnosis and would like to connect with someone that has pretty much walked the walk and understands what they're going through. We are the Connecticut Family Health Information Center, and we help families navigate healthcare and just state agency for their children with special healthcare needs. So to make sure that they're getting the services that they should. We are also, our Connecticut Kids as Self-Advocates is a youth leadership organization and our advocacy for ages 13 to 26. And they meet once a month, the third weekend of every Saturday, every third Saturday of the month. And they go over leadership skills, advocacy, and it's a really great group. And again, it's for 13 to 26. We are in the process of creating a sibling leadership network support group. It's pretty much shadowing our listener program. We also help families now with their Chart in the Life course. We have genetic resources, special education advocacy, a monthly newsletter, speaker programs, and so forth. And again, if there's any questions later after this, feel free to contact us. We'd be more than happy to discuss more and explain more of what our services are. So I'd like to introduce Nancy Labogo, who is our co-executive director. And also I do want to mention that we are recording this series, and I will make sure that everybody that is on here will receive a copy of that so you can go back and review it. So take it away, Nancy.
Thanks, Carmina. I'm Nancy Labogo, co-executive director for Path Parent Family Voices of Connecticut. And so tonight it's my pleasure to introduce our guest presenter. Her name is Kathleen. And Kathleen, sorry, I just don't want to bungle your name.
It's actually easier now. I just got married, so it's
right.
Hayes.
Kathleen Hayes. Okay, thank you. So we need to
You're welcome.
Bio. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Kathleen is an attorney and co-founding member of the Hartford-based law firm Disability Planning Partners. Kathleen focuses her practice on serving elders and individuals with disabilities of all ages and levels of need. Within her work, she places a special emphasis on planning for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. This work is driven by a personal passion, Kathleen's relationship with her Uncle Danny, who has an intellectual disability. Kathleen's Uncle Danny formed her heart for advocacy. He taught her not only the beauty of disability, but also the incredible vulnerability, stress, and fear that families carry as they navigate a complex system that seems to plummet before every peak. So true. Kathleen guides families through the complex labyrinth of public benefits such as Medicaid and supplemental social income, SSI, She also prepares special needs trusts, provides guidance on ABLE accounts, which we're going to talk about in one of our upcoming series, and assists in selecting the appropriate legal decision-making tools at age 18 and beyond. Kathleen is dedicated to ensuring that families understand the supports and services that are available for their loved ones, and that they develop a comprehensive and holistic plan for the present and future welfare and success of their loved ones. Kathleen graduated magna cum laude from Western New England University in 2013. Upon graduating, she served as a judicial law clerk for Justice David Borden and Judge Thomas West of the Connecticut Appellate Court. Kathleen subsequently worked as a special education attorney prior to concentrating her practice on elder law and disability planning. Kathleen serves as vice chair of the North Region Advocacy Council for the Connecticut Department of Developmental Services. She is also the treasurer of the Elder Law Section and the Connecticut Bar Association, and serves on the board of directors for the Connecticut Family Support Network. Kathleen is an avid volunteer and coach with the Middletown Special Olympics team, and was recently elected to the board of directors for the Special Olympics Connecticut. So we're so thrilled to have you. As you can see, she's a wealth of knowledge,
Thank you.
and that this is her passion. So we thank you again for leading this presentation for us, Kathleen.
It's my pleasure. And I will say, I have just, for some reason, I can't see anybody anymore. I'm trying to figure that out on my end, but the Zoom meeting just kind of disappeared for me. So I'm sorry that I've kind of been clicking around over here while you introduced me. I'm just trying to get back so I can see everybody. But I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do that.
Oh boy.
You can all see me and hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Let me just try one other thing. I don't want to lose the meeting, so I just would love to see everyone.
Gallery view? Is that
Say that again?
the gallery view top right of your screen? Is there like
Yeah.
It appears as if I'm not even in a meeting right now. I didn't touch anything and all of a sudden my screen changed.
Is it all white with
It says Zoom. It says the general.
do you have a at the bottom of your screen, do you see like the little Zoom icon anywhere?
I do, yeah, and I have one that says Zoom meeting that I was in, and I can see I'm in a meeting. Do not disturb. That's okay. You can see me, you can hear me, so I guess I'll treat it like a phone call and I'll look into the camera. So I'm not able to screen share because I don't actually see that possibility anymore. So what I'm going to do is just explain to everybody what the spectrum of decision making is. So that's a little bit of an overview relative to tonight's presentation, which is more of a question and answer format, so that we can get toward the down and dirty of how do these things actually work. But to put it in a little bit of context, ultimately, there is, as I see it, a spectrum of decision-making options for individuals. And those options, what we're really talking about is when somebody turns age 18, they become a legal adult in the eyes of the law. And at that point in time, irrespective of whether or not that individual feels ready to make decisions for themselves, as who really does at the age of 18 feel ready, and even if you do feel ready, who really is ready to make these decisions by themselves. The law says no matter whether you feel ready or not, you're in the driver's seat. However, there is a spectrum of legal tools that's available to individuals to be able to assist an individual in making decisions, or to appoint somebody to make decisions on that individual's behalf if they're simply unable or want some help in making a particular decision. So when I think about this spectrum of decision making, I break it down into decisions for health and well-being, and decisions for finances, because these legal tools manage different decisions depending on what arises. And this spectrum ranges from what's known as the least restrictive to the most restrictive. So the least restrictive options would be those options where the individual is acting autonomously, they're not giving up any decision-making control or authority, but they've appointed somebody as a backup or as a helper in the event that the individual is not wanting to make decisions all by themselves. And the most restrictive are options where we're talking about somebody else stepping into the driver's seat, stepping into the shoes of the individual and making decisions for them, as opposed to the individual making decisions for themselves. So I'm happy to speak individually with individuals, anyone on this call that has a question as to these different tools. But we're really going to focus tonight on a supported decision-making agreement and an advance directive, because we have individuals participating on this call this evening who have these documents in place. And these are documents, I term them kind of the trifecta of decision-making documents for those individuals for whom the least restrictive options are appropriate. And I always caveat this and say that even though there's a spectrum of legal planning tools, with some being more restrictive, you really have to look at what's right for you, and that's going to depend upon your individual needs, individual disabilities, individual's ability to comprehend and to communicate as well. So just because an option is the least restrictive doesn't always mean it's the most appropriate. And likewise, just because an option is the most restrictive doesn't mean that it's the most or least appropriate. It's a case-by-case determination. So the special three, the trifecta of these least restrictive documents, is a power of attorney, an advance directive, and a supported decision-making agreement. An advance directive and a power of attorney, advance directives have to do with decisions for health care and well-being. A power of attorney has to do with financial decisions. And a supported decision-making agreement, as we're going to see in just a moment, can have to do with financial decisions, healthcare decisions, and really any other decisions that are pertinent in that individual's life. So let's start with the supported decision-making agreement. And I know we have a small group here, and I know I can't see you, but if you have questions, I'd love to keep this conversational. So feel free to add them in the chat, and Carmina will let me know that somebody's got a question. So I'd love to start with Ruth and Sammy. I'm assuming everyone can still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. I'm a little nervous for a second. I've been talking to such a quiet group. So supported decision-making, to give a little bit of context, is a very novel concept in Connecticut. There's only a handful of states out there that have actually really educated individuals and organizations statewide about what supported decision-making agreements are, and some states have gone so far as to recognize them in their laws. So they're codified, so to speak. Connecticut doesn't have that, but we do have a task force that's currently trying to do just that, to educate individuals and organizations about what these agreements are, how they work, and to ultimately get our Connecticut laws to potentially recognize them. But what we're going to demonstrate tonight, I think pretty effectively, is that even though Connecticut law does not recognize these supported decision-making agreements, it doesn't mean that they're not valid. It simply means that there might be a bit of a learning curve for the people that are receiving the document, but that it's still a legally binding contract that is valid to set forth who you want to set up as your team of supporters. So the goal of a supported decision-making agreement, as we're going to see with Sammy and her mom, Ruth, is that Sammy's in the driver's seat at all times. The supported decision-making agreement is one where she is able to choose individuals to support her in different decisions that she may need to make. So Sammy and Ruth, I'd love to hear from you. Could you tell the group how you first learned about supported decision-making, given that it's so new?
My mom and I first learned about the supported decision-making agreement at the Building a Great Life conference in October 2015.
Sorry, Sammy, can you speak up just a little bit? I don't know if everyone's having difficulty hearing you, but I am just a bit.
My mom and I first the supported decision-making agreement at the Building a Great Life conference in October 2015.
Okay.
Kath and Casa went to.
Right, so I attended a breakout session. It was called Alternatives to Guardianship, as we had been having conversations with our school special education department. Every time I went in for a parent-teacher conference, our special education teacher would say, you have to get guardianship. You have to get guardianship before Samantha turns 18, or else you won't be able to help her. You won't be able to do anything for her. And it was a little scary because I didn't know and didn't know anything else. So this conference came up and I was really excited to see this Alternatives to Guardianship on the agenda. So I attended the breakout session, and we knew other people that had guardianship agreements, but it didn't seem appropriate for Sammy. It just, you know, we even went as far as to fill out the forms, but we never submitted them. We just didn't get to that point.
And what about it, Ruth, didn't seem appropriate? If you could just expound on what was it that was giving you a sense of reticence?
Sammy's very, she's a smart girl. You know, she has a learning disability, which sometimes means that she needs a little extra explanation or, you know, a little help understanding things. But she knows what she wants. She knows what she wants in life. She knows what her goals are. She knows what her path is. And so to us, guardianship felt like we were taking away that power of her making her own decisions, and we didn't want to do that.
Just one moment. I think that's a really great explanation of why guardianship didn't feel like a good fit. So that's a good example of why. So guardianship on the spectrum is one of the most restrictive legal decision-making options, because it means that you as the parent are stepping in, and it sounds like the discomfort was that you didn't want to step in to make decisions for Sammy because she was and is able to make those decisions for herself. So, okay, walk us through it. You went to this conference, you heard about supported decision-making. It sounded like a great alternative. Who was the speaker? Were they from a different state?
Yes, it was a lawyer, and I forget her name, but she was from Massachusetts.
Okay.
And at the time they were running a pilot program in Massachusetts, and they had just a limited number of people that were doing this program. And it just seemed so exciting to me that, you know, they had this option, that I asked a lot of questions during the breakout session, and then at the end I stayed behind to talk to her and said, okay, so this isn't legal in Connecticut right now, but can we still do it? And she said, absolutely. Like, as you said before, it's still a legal binding document. And she pointed me to their website. So their website is a really good resource for that.
Yeah.
Which I guess we could provide to the attendees today. And there's a template there that we used. We took the template. I modified the phone numbers and the references to be Connecticut rather than Massachusetts, and we went from there.
That's awesome. And I again feel so badly that I can't share my screen, because I did have, and perhaps maybe we'll just circulate it later, Carmina, I pulled up some supported decision-making, that website, to be able to kind of navigate everybody through it. But the website, let's see where it went, is, I believe it's the supported decision-making, supporteddecisions.org. is the website. So that's supporteddecisions.org. And the way that you would navigate the path to what Ruth and Sammy are explaining is if you look along the top tab on that website, there's a Getting Started tab, and you can go to SDM agreement form, supported decision-making agreement form. And then what will come up are you can go and scroll down, and there's a hyperlink to a list of SDM model agreements, supported decision-making model agreements, because what various states that have enacted supported decision-making have done is they've created their own model forms. And so you can look in Washington, D.C. has a form, Texas has a form, Delaware has a form, and then there's just a simple, a universal model agreement. So I would encourage everybody to go to that website if you're interested in supported decision making and check out the different forms, and ultimately modify it as you want. If it doesn't exactly speak to your particular needs, that's okay. What it basically, what I think from my perspective is important is for the individual creating the decision-making agreement to sign it, as Sammy did, as well as getting the signature of those people that are going to be your supporters, recognizing and consenting to the fact that they will be supporters. And if you can, have two witnesses on that document and a notary to stamp and seal and make it look and feel very official. You know, if I look here and I see you didn't have it, did you not have it notarized, Sammy and Ruth? And if not, has that impacted your ability to use it at all?
We didn't have it notarized, and it's not something that's been questioned. Like you said, we had two witnesses.
Yep.
So no, it's not been an issue.
Perfect. So actually that was, I think you've kind of explained why you chose the supported decision-making agreement. You took your next steps, you took that initiative. Were you nervous about creating the agreement, especially knowing that this was kind of paving new ground?
No, I wasn't never worried about having a supported decision-making agreement. I was actually worried before.
When guardianship was on the table?
Or like, I didn't know what it would be like here after high school.
Yeah, the first time we talked about it, Sammy actually cried. We came out of the conference, and I was like, I'm so excited. I have to tell you about this. And we were talking about it all the way home. And Sammy started to cry, and she said, I was so nervous about what was going to happen after high school. And she really hadn't articulated that she was that nervous. But no, it was, so like she said, no, we weren't nervous. We were really just excited. We couldn't wait to get started and come up with the document, and Sammy pick her supporters.
Yeah. So tell me about that. So I have a copy of your agreement in front of me, which, as you said, was one of the form agreements that you pulled and kind of modified. So just to kind of give people a general idea of what this document looks like, it starts out with an appointment of supporters, and it says, I, Sammy, am entering into this agreement voluntarily. And then she goes on to choose supporters, and it gives the name of all of these individuals. And after naming all of these supporters, there's a section that says, my supporter may help me with life decisions about. And this is where it all applies to you. And so I would love to hear, number one, how was it that you decided what areas you wanted people to support you in?
I went through all the categories and I chose what I would like to have help with making decisions in each category.
Okay. So I'm going to read the categories for people. And again, there's an other. So this is not set in stone. So it's obtaining food, clothing, and a place to live. And you can say yes or no. You either want support with it or you don't. And if so, you name who's going to support you. Physical health, mental health, managing my money or property, getting an education or other training, choosing or maintaining my services and supports, and finding a job. And then there's other. So anything else that is particular to an individual. I know certain areas that I've talked to other clients about would be social supporters, people to help make social decisions or to get involved in different social activities. I can't think of so many others right now, but basically you think about what is it in your life that you would benefit from this group of supporters. So you went through and you picked what applied to you. And then how did you go about choosing your supporters?
So Sammy, we sat down and we looked at which pieces were relevant to Sammy's own situation. So for example, she attends community college. So education was important for her. She sees a number of different doctors and specialists. So the medical piece of it was really important to her. So in general, Samantha picked people that knew Samantha really well and knew what her goals were and know her personality. And for example, one of the financial supporters is a close friend of the family who is an accountant.
Oh.
So it was people that had those special skills, plus people that knew her well and people that she felt comfortable with too, right? They wouldn't kind of try to push her in a direction, but that would just give her advice. Because at the end of the day, no matter what advice is given, Sammy can still decide to listen or do something different. She's not bound to do what they're telling her to do.
I think that's a really good point about when you choose supporters, is thinking about who is going to give you the space to make your own decision. Because I think we all know those people that kind of have their thoughts, and that it's very hard for them to advise on a decision that might be right, or the pros and cons of a decision for someone else, if they have a strong opinion about it. So I think that's a really valid point in terms of thinking about who's a good supporter, what good qualities they would have to really imbue or, exemplify. So you mentioned a couple of different areas of support. Can you give us an example of when and how you've used this agreement?
I've used it at the community college and at the doctor's office so far.
Okay, and so when you used it at the community college, how exactly are you using it? Is it so that your supporters can have access or communicate regarding your educational needs?
Yes.
Yeah, so obviously at college, there's another step that you need to take to. The FERPA form is something that we weren't aware of when Samantha started in college.
They didn't tell us.
Right, and it seems like they don't want to tell you about the FERPA form. But so when Samantha was struggling to get she was doing ECE 101, so Early Childhood Education 101, and there was a lot of field trips, and there was a lot of back and forward emails about arranging, right, where to meet, and they were very difficult to follow. So she asked me to step in and try and help her coordinate, because she's relying on us for transportation too. So that had, to do with my schedule as well as hers. So, so we did approach the college with the supported decision-making agreement and the FERPA form. And at that point, they started including me in conversations. And it was more just to CC. I was a CC on some of the emails. Nothing was directed to me. It was just Samantha making all the decisions. It was just me being in the loop so that I could maybe guide her in how to respond to some of the emails and situations.
Mm-hmm. And FERPA is has to do with the privacy of your educational records, correct?
Right. It's kind of like HIPAA for education.
Right. So in addition to the supported decision-making agreement, did you have to fill out other release forms, like a FERPA release form, in addition to the supported decision-making agreement?
Yes.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And for, I think you mentioned medical appointments, did you have to fill out like a HIPAA release as well?
I think one time you had to fill out a release, but for the most part, they've just accepted
Good.
the supported decision-making agreement. We have really great doctors.
Good. Yeah.
I'm not sure that that would apply to everybody. There may be other things that other doctors would expect, but we really do have great medical professionals.
Good. And that's great. And I think that that's true of maybe it's a universal truth that for a lot of people, depending on who's looking at this agreement, it might be very readily accepted, even though the individual's not totally familiar with supported decision making. They know who you are, and they have an established relationship, and they respect the fact that this is a written document that's witnessed and or notarized, and that they're therefore going to honor it. I think that's really important to know that, you know, this can work for individuals, and also just to recognize that there may be situations where because of other laws, there will need to be additional consent or release forms that might also have to be filled out with the supported decision-making agreement.
Right.
So have you had any difficulty? Have you presented the form to somebody or the agreement to anybody that's rejected it or given you a tough time?
No, we haven't.
Okay, good.
Not so far.
Yeah, that's great. Good. If you did have difficulty, what do you think you would do? How do you think you would respond to that challenge?
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
I know I didn't send it to you in advance either, so I'm really putting you on the spot.
I don't know, maybe, I mean, obviously have a discussion with them and see if there's something else that they would need to support it, or just maybe more information about the supported decision making. Because like you said,
I think that's a really good point. And maybe what I would recommend for individuals in that situation would be to put together, and in the future, hopefully I can just refer you to a resource, because with the Supported Decision Making Coalition, we're working on putting together a toolkit that you can hand to somebody as an educational material so that they understand what this is. They have a little bit more background and context. But maybe in the meantime, I'd recommend that people go to the different resource websites, the supported decision making website for Massachusetts, for example, and maybe have an article on hand or some information about supported decision making, so that you are providing some further information and context to individuals, and that they can see that this document didn't just arise out of thin air. There's a lot supporting it, and there's many states that have these and recognize these agreements also.
Right.
Because sometimes I think people are scared. Organizations or institutions have very strict guidelines, so maybe if they realize that this is more global than just this one person or this one form, then maybe if anybody had an issue, it would be resolved pretty readily. So you talked about how you felt excited to have a supported decision-making agreement before you created it. How do you feel now that you have it?
I'm really happy about it. I'm excited I could make my own decisions and also ask for help.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I feel excited that I could make my own decisions and also ask for help if I need.
That's awesome.
It's great to see her so independent. I mean, Sammy has a part-time job. She's going to college.
Awesome.
She has a bank account. She has her own small business that she started up making bracelets. So she's doing a lot of things that, that she loves to do. She's just living her life and living her best life. And this really supports that. And from a parent standpoint, it's a relief, because I know that for me, the guardianship, I felt one of my concerns about guardianship was what happens when we're gone. We could have a guardianship agreement, and but still give her all her independence, you know, basically have the same scenario as with a supported decision-making agreement. But then what happens when we're gone and somebody else takes over her guardianship? Are they going to follow through with that?
Right.
So with the supported decision-making agreement, she has her team of supporters, people that care about her, people that know what she wants, and they're going to be there for her. So it's a big relief for us as parents to know that she has this in place.
That's awesome. And I think so much of what's important for individuals and families is that long-term plan. It's, you know, making sure that, and it's true for all of us, making sure that as every single person ages and generations shift, that we all have a continuing network of people, of friends, of community, of supporters that can continue to help in different transitions, because you know, as individuals age, they become less likely or less able to provide support that maybe a younger generation can. So to have that long-term planning and that peace of mind, I think that's great, and it speaks to a really universal planning objective, so that you're achieving with this.
And to that point, she can change her supporters at any time too. So if she wanted to change her supporters, she could do that at any time.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point, that nothing is set in stone, that you can, because if you create it, you can revoke it. And there's no, you don't have to get a court involved. You don't have to get anyone else involved. You just revise that document. So I think that's a very good point. Are there resources that you would recommend to individuals to kind of learn more about supported decision making? I know we talked about the Massachusetts website.
The webinar you showed on your first.
Oh, thank you.
So you're the resource.
So what I'll do is I will actually, I'll email that to Carmina so that everybody can have access to it. And really it was the overview from the last webinar that we did about all the different decision-making options. But I've also put together for the toolkit, along with Andrew Comero, who's a financial planner, we put together a handout that is kind of just a fancier version of that, of the PowerPoint. It's basically a condensed into, I think it's a 3-page document with charts that talk about all of the different options and how they work. So I'll send that as well, so people have it. But thank you both so much for sharing and being open. And I think the more that you can talk and share your experience, the more people are going to feel like this is an option that is real, and it is now. It's not something they have to wait for.
Exactly.
So we have one question, Kathleen.
Yes.
Well, a couple actually.
Okay.
So one is, so if you have a supported decision-making agreement in place, do you need to have a health proxy document or other document in place to cover healthcare decisions?
So the answer to that, I think, is it depends, because as Sammy and Ruth were saying, their doctors didn't necessarily require like a HIPAA authorization. But that being said, the reason I talk about these 3 documents together is because I always recommend that somebody have all 3, because the ability to create one means that you can create all 3. And the reason I say that is because the advanced directive, which has to do with health and medical decisions, and we'll talk a little bit with Emily and her parents, Chris and Julie, in a moment about that, has to do with health and healthcare decisions, as I said, and a power of attorney has to do with financial decisions. What I really like about those documents is that you're naming somebody to act if you're not able to act, or if you simply want them to basically support a decision, kind of like a supported decision-making agreement. But if you lose capacity, meaning if I was, if a tree fell on me and I was no longer able to make decisions myself, the people that I name in that document can continue to make decisions for me. With a supported decision-making agreement, you don't have that ability to have the document continue on if the individual is no longer able to make their own decisions, because, as Sammy said, She's in the driver's seat. She makes the decision. So as we talk about how to best protect yourself and protect your autonomy, I want to see people having a plethora of documents that are going to step in at any time, whether or not the individual is able to make decisions themselves or if they lose capacity. And those power of attorney and healthcare directives are an either or. You don't have to wait until someone doesn't have capacity to say, hey, I want to invite my mom or my sibling to be part of my medical appointment or to help guide or even make medical decisions for me if I'm going to defer to them.
And I'd like to add to that too, since we listened to Kathleen's last webinar, our whole family is now working on power of attorney and healthcare directive forms for all of us, not just for Sammy, but for all of us. So it just sounds like a really smart thing to do.
Good. That's awesome.
Yeah, that would be a good thing.
Carm, can I just, I'm the one who asked that question, Kathleen.
Yep.
And I asked it because we had gotten into a situation with a very critical clinical trial that we had entered. And, you know, we had worked with this team before and they knew Stephanie and knew her well and knew that, you know, she does have those ups and downs, like when she's, you know, she has a, if she gets into like a difficult behavior pattern or whatever, you know, participation and communication can be a little bit difficult for her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but when she's not, then she, you know, like Sammy, she can, you know, she can participate, she can voice her own, you know, needs, wants, and decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we've always leaned, although I don't have the documents that Ruth has in place, but we've always leaned in that SDM way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, so we went to this clinical trial, we got involved and went through everything, got to that last step, and they were like, well, you don't have the documentation to show that you have guardianship over her. And because of that, they eliminated us from the trial. And I was like, well, she's right here. You've done all these steps with her, which has so far been able to participate. She's here telling you that she wants to participate. But because we didn't have that piece of paper, they would not accept anything else except guardianship. You know?
Yeah, that sounds like it might have just been a, almost like a, I hate to say it, but potentially a discrimination issue where and this is part of the problem, I think, more globally, and why I like to framework, and not just me, but other professionals are really trying to push the frameworking of least restrictive options and most restrictive, because so many people, like the schools, the hospitals, say you need guardianship, but there's other alternatives out there. And there is an institutional bias in so many regards to the most restrictive option, to guardianship. And so it sounds like that was a situation where maybe the hospital staff was not fully educated on what's required, and when an individual is able to speak for themselves, guardianship is simply not even appropriate.
Yeah, and I think that's the case. You know, they were not educated on all the other options. They just knew guardianship and they were stuck on that, and that was it. End of story. So, you know, we are going to, you know, make sure that we have all those, you know, the 3 documents that you talked in place.
Good.
And, you know, and share it with them and say, well, this is what we have. And, you know, I would be willing to like really push it all the way if they refuse those 3 documents.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So there was another question regarding the FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. What if the community college refuses to acknowledge that agreement? What can you do next?
Refuses to acknowledge the FERPA release?
Correct.
My understanding is that the college is the one that's providing the release to be signed.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that you have to go to, what we had to do was we went to the registrar department, and they actually did give Sammy a bit of a runaround at the beginning. It was like she went to the they were told her to go to the registrar. She went to the registrar by herself. She got she asked the question, and she walked away with a brochure and a business card for somebody else to go talk to. So
Mm.
we elevated it to the dean of students, and we actually ended up, she was super nice. We went in there, we sat down with her. She physically got the form and sat there and signed it for us. And she said, what you did was the right thing to do. The registrar should have known what you were asking for, but if you have the same problem in the future, please come to me. So that's what I would suggest from our experience, is if you have that issue, go to the dean, and they should straighten it out.
Yeah, I think that's good advice.
I think we're okay now.
All right. So I apologize, Emily and Chris and Julie, that I can't see you. But I hope I'm doing a good job faking it, that I can see everybody.
No, you would never know. So you're doing well.
Oh, so I may have misspoken. I think I was saying that, Emily, that you had an advanced directive, but you have a power of attorney, correct?
I'm unmute.
There you go.
Yes.
You have awesome. So tell me about how you decided to have a power of attorney, what that whole process was like for you.
Well, my parents were the ones that decided they would become my power of attorney, and I agreed to it because I knew that they were the ones that would be able to make the best decisions on my behalf.
That's awesome. And I think what I draw from that, which is really important, is that when somebody creates a power of attorney document, what's important is that, number one, they understand the document, that you understand this has to do with your financial decisions. And number two, that you trust the people that you're appointing as your agents. So in your case, you appointed your parents, and you're able to say to whomever you're signing it in front of, I trust my parents. And I want to be clear that this document does need to be notarized and have two witnesses, because it is, this document has legal requirements in terms of how it's created in Connecticut. So that's what's important for the person you're signing this in front of, the notary or an attorney, to be able to know you understand the agreement and you trust the people you're appointing. Chris and Julie, do you want to weigh in a little bit on how you decided to pursue this option of the power of attorney?
Well, it was really our attorney's suggestion. We initially contacted our attorney to develop a special needs trust for Emily. We're going through the process of getting our wills updated, and she said, have you thought about Emily's future and how you're going to handle asset transfers to her to support her when we're gone? And so we got on the subject of that. So, but more importantly, now you really need to have the power of attorney. Once, this is back before she turned 18. So we developed at that point, it was more specialized power of attorney. I think the laws have changed since we did that, I think back in 2013. So more recently, we updated the power of attorney. It's more of a standard form. So, but anyway, it was just really, once she turned 18 and she was unable to speak for herself, for example, we're in the emergency room and she was 18, she would need to let us talk on her behalf.
And that did come up last spring when she was in the emergency room, and the woman who came in to go over our insurance forms and whatever said, and do you happen to have a power of attorney with you? I
said, yeah, I have it in my back pocket.
I said, no, in the emergency room, it's not something I usually carry with me.
Right.
And is that something that we should have on our phone? I mean, I never heard of such a thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's something that, so for example, I would recommend that clients give copies of their documents to their doctors or their banks so that they're on file. But you're exactly right that in the case of, an emergency,
This was at Yale. It's like, and it didn't matter when I said no, she spoke to us in any event, but she threw me completely off when she
yeah, but maybe to your point, for anybody listening, it's a good idea to have password protected, of course, but to have these on your phone, if you're going to have your phone, to be able to kind of just pull it up.
Yeah.
Right.
So it sounds to me like you might have both a power of attorney and advance directive, and the
Correct, yes.
Okay, perfect. So just to be clear on the difference, advanced directives have to do with health and medical and personal welfare, and the power of attorney has to do with financial decisions. Many years ago, I think it was before 2006, the law allowed you to have both of those documents together, just one power of attorney that included medical decisions, but now they're actually separated out. I
Actually, at that point, just let me interrupt.
Sure.
Pulling out our current form, as I mentioned, we just had it redone, and it specifically says right in the top paragraph, this power of attorney does not authorize the agent to make healthcare decisions. So
exactly.
they
Yes.
state that in the current agreement.
Yes.
I also wanted to add, if I may, that last year we added her 2 older brothers as agents in case something should happen to us because we are getting older. And they would also have the power of attorney.
Right.
So we had it amended to include both of them.
Right.
Good. And once again, that speaks to the theme of the succession planning and the long-term plan of being able to have that continuum of decision making. Emily, can you talk to us about, is there a time that you used your power of attorney that you can think of? Well, your parents just gave a good example of using the healthcare directive, so maybe that's, yeah. How does it feel to have documents in place?
I feel very secure knowing that if anything were to happen to me, that all of my decisions would be taken care of on my behalf.
Does it feel good to be in the driver's seat for these decisions?
Yes.
That's
because when I was younger and I would go like with my parents to their lawyer, like I knew that eventually I would have to make these decisions. It just now I understand how beneficial they are, and even back then I was happy that I could make those decisions.
I think that's awesome. And I think it's so great, like you said, that you were kind of involved even when you were younger with going and talking about your future, because it's your future. And it's great that you were involved in the conversations about your future planning, and that it almost sounds like you were able to mentally prepare for the future because you had an idea of what to maybe expect.
Yeah. Totally.
That's awesome. So I know we're kind of running out of time, but I know you also have an ABLE account, which is a financial account that allows you to manage your own money, but the money that's in that ABLE account is invisible or protected, so that if you're on SSI or if you're on Medicaid, that your benefits are going to stay exactly where they are. Whatever's in that account will be invisible when we're looking at whether you meet the asset requirements for those programs. So how does it feel to have an ABLE account?
It's sort of like how I feel about the power of attorney, because I know that at least with the money is there when I need it, which is, very good in the intent that not in the event that I have to make a very important decision that I would need it for.
Have you used your ABLE account? Can you give an example of something that you've used it for?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet. Oh, there you go. So you're saving, which is very good. But you're contributing money to it every now and again?
Yeah.
Awesome. And does that feel good that you're able to kind of save money in a way that's going to keep any benefits in place?
Yes, completely.
Good. I think that's awesome. And I particularly was really happy when ABLE accounts first came about, which was back in, I think it was 2004. 2015. And they first became a little more popular around, I think, 2016, because kind of like supported decision making, people had to start, you know, kind of learning and understanding what these new accounts were. But I particularly liked that, unlike a special needs trust, which is controlled by someone else other than you, Emily, it's controlled maybe by your parents or a trustee, you can control the money in the ABLE account and not lose your benefits, or your agents, your parents or your siblings can access that money for you as well. So you have all that support, but that you can manage it if you want. And I personally really like that it's important that you have that opportunity, and it sounds like you're enjoying that opportunity and it's making you feel secure and in control at the same time.
Right.
What
Because back when they would speak about the special needs trust, I didn't really understand it. But now that I'm older, I understand a little bit more about what an ABLE account is.
Yeah, and there is a difference that, you know, an ABLE account doesn't solve every problem. You still need a third-party special needs trust for a future inheritance. But at least there is, of all the options out there, there is one that allows you to manage that money independently. Were you saying something as well, Julie?
I was just going to add that if she was going to be going to camp this summer, we would have used some of that money.
Oh, great.
But
Summer camp,
since
yeah.
there are no camps that aren't, you know, in session because of
Yeah.
COVID, that's not an option, but hopefully next summer.
Yeah, well, what I think that's a really good example. And so the rules of these ABLE accounts are, it's got to be used just for Emily.
Right.
And it has to be used for a disability related expense, but pretty much anything under the sun is a disability related expense, because as long as it benefits Emily, it benefits Emily. And if something benefits anybody, disability or not, it's good for you. And
Right.
so that's what the regulations for ABLE accounts really say. So I try to emphasize that with clients too, that this is an account that's meant to be flexible and work for you, not against you.
One of the key things, I think, with the limitations of SSI, because Emily gets SSI,
Yep.
she does contribute to the household for rent and living expenses and everything, but still there's that $2,000 limit that you can't go over or impact your SSI, along with the wages she makes.
And
She
now
makes
she's
money.
making, she has
So
a
you
job.
really have to balance that. So having that vehicle of the ABLE account to move money into, so that it keeps that $2,000 limit in check,
Right.
is very important. So.
Yes. So I always say to clients, I think one of the best times to get an ABLE account is if someone's on SSI, because you've got that $2,000 limit. So you're able to save money in the ABLE account well above that limit. And you're also able to use the ABLE account to pay rent, as you said, which ultimately lets you get the full SSI benefit, which is $783. So I think this is a really good teaser, because our next session in this series is on ABLE accounts. So Andrew Comer, who I mentioned earlier, and myself will be talking about ABLE accounts and financial literacy and education for individuals. So I thank you, Emily and Chris and Julie, for kind of explaining your perspective and experience, because I think the context always helps to understand how and when these things work practically for individuals.
So we have a couple more, one comment. Someone had said that regarding the power of attorney, they said, consider keeping it on a Google Drive.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
An option. And then someone else had asked, how can we open up an ABLE account?
Good question. So Emily, or Chris and Julie, do you want to speak to your experience of opening an ABLE?
Yeah, when we first considered opening an ABLE account, we found out that Connecticut does not have a plan. I guess when it was
Not yet. Yep.
initiated, there's a certain number of states that have them. So we saw there's a few states around the country that have it. We just decided to put it into Rhode Island, just for whatever reason, it's close by. Not that it really matters. And as far as opening the account, it's very simple. You just go to savewithable.com, which is the nationwide clearinghouse or whatever you want to call it. It directs you to all the individual states. You pick the state you want to work with, and it's really about a 20-minute or half-hour exercise in setting up the account.
Can you give that website again?
It is savewithable.com.
Thank you. And that's actually a new one for me because I've always gone to the ABLE National Resource Center, which is ablenrc.org. But this is great. Oh, yeah, I just went to it in front of me. That's great. So just to give a little further background to that question, Connecticut doesn't have an ABLE program, but it doesn't totally matter because it's part of a federal law, which means that the government basically said, we as Connecticut residents can open an ABLE account in any state that allows out-of-state residents to do so. Because everything's online with online banking, it's virtually identical to having a Connecticut account. I've had clients that have given very positive reports for various states, Rhode Island, as well as Massachusetts and Ohio, actually. Ohio is the first state to open ABLE accounts, and I've heard they are very user-friendly in many ways. But that's basically what you do. You can go to these websites, and a lot of them have the ability to compare the features of all of these accounts. They work the same way, meaning they're going to make the money invisible. There are certain limits. You can't put more than $15,000 into the account each year. But what you're really comparing is what financial institution is managing the money. So some states use Vanguard, some use Fidelity. All of the ABLE accounts are run through the Department of Treasury for the state, kind of like the Connecticut Chet account or the 529 accounts. It's not like you can go to People's Bank down the road and open an ABLE account. You have to do it through the State Department of Treasury, and these websites are really good resources to compare those different features.
And you even get a little bit of interest. Not much. But
Investment.
Interest,
Yeah.
the point, it grows income tax free. So whatever interest you accumulate and the funds are invested is not income, nor do you have to pay income taxes on the distribution. So it's tax
it's
advantage.
really a wonderful vehicle.
Yeah.
It is, yes.
Oh, yeah, that's fantastic to learn about. I'm looking forward to the next session on the 29th. So it'll be good. So that's all the questions we have. Thank you again, Kathleen. We really appreciate your expertise, and Julie and Chris and Emily, Sammy and Ruth.
Yes,
thank you for sharing.
For kind of helping to facilitate and give the content for tonight. And the more of these, I think these interactive presentations are great. It would be nice if you, if anybody shared feedback with you later to know. I just think it's a user-friendly way to understand concepts that can sometimes just feel like they're not user-friendly.
Yeah, and I also think that hearing directly from the families is really key because, they can share insights and tips and, little things that might not necessarily be in, might not necessarily be in the paperwork or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you all. And Kathleen, thank you. This was really wonderful.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you. And there will be a survey coming out to everybody shortly. And keep July 29th open to learn more about the financial management and the ABLE accounts. And we'll see Kathleen again. And yeah, thank you. And again, we will send out a recording once we get that completed to everybody that attended tonight. And if you have any further questions, feel free to contact us. Or Kathleen also.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Carmina. I appreciate you hosting.
No, thank you. Thank you. I just, I apologize for, we like you did a great job. So
good. I can't
Flying blind, right?
But thank you again, everybody. Have a wonderful night, and hopefully we'll see you at the end of the month.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.